Welcome all, this is Ian for Zero HP. Today we are going to review Firewatch. Yes, it's been out since February 9th. Yes, I do work 40 hours a week. No, I don't get a review copy because I average about 4 views a video. For the 4 of you watching, this is the experience point. So we're going to start off, I'm doing things a little bit differently for the experience point reviews. I want to break them down into categories. The first thing is not necessarily the most important thing, just like the last thing is not the least important thing. The first thing up is what you see, and that is visuals up first. Now, the visuals in Firewatch are absolutely gorgeous. Not in a high fidelity sort of, oh my god, photorealistic beautifulness. Nothing like that. It is constantly transforming between almost photorealism, horizons, sunsets, where you feel, okay, I look like I'm here in this Wyoming forest, and then suddenly it'll change, and it's a drawing, and it's just beautiful. I will say that, there are a few things that, there's some hitches there, there's some really low textures in certain areas, but for the most part, it's gorgeous, it's driven by an art style more than it's driven by any kind of fidelity, which works perfectly for this style of game. Your character's hand, Henry, his hands are kind of fat and they're big and they don't look quite right, but they just add to his character. And everything you're seeing is it's different. It looks a lot, it's sort of almost like a Borderlands look, but not quite cel-shaded. It's very hard to nail down. You'll be seeing it here. As I speak, I'm speaking over some trailers and some game footage, so just take a look at it, and you can kind of see how it kind of tricks your brain as you look from horizon to horizon. You go from woods to plain, and it will switch between those two extremes of photorealism and almost a cartoon-esque art style, very art-driven. And I really appreciated that. It was different, it was fresh, and it was really nice to experience that. And the colors are vivid and bright, and and when you go into darkness down in the cave, it can be pretty frightening actually. So they just did a great job. They run the gamut for a relatively small map too. It wasn't like a big, a huge map of any kind. So I thought that was it was really nice, refreshing to see. Not a lot of weak points in the visuals. You don't really see too much. But the loneliness aspect is actually a part of the game that is pretty important both to the narrative and just to the overall gameplay. So I'm not going to judge it based on the fact that it didn't have any people in it other than Henry's fat ass hands. So that was the graphics. The graphics were really good in the sense of what they were. I mean, I'm not holding it to a standard of photorealism like I would the newest Call of Duty or some of these big role-playing games. It's just that's not what this game is. It's not trying to do that, and therefore I give the graphics a good high score, and they were just beautiful in their own rights. Great art direction. I'd be looking for probably a nomination for art direction of the year for the game of the year awards that are coming on later. All right, so that was graphics. Let's move on. Now I'm going to separate performance from gameplay. The reason I'm doing that is, for me, gameplay is more the interaction between you and the world, how you interact both through the controller and the way those actions feel in the game itself. And performance is almost how those things are running. So it's like if you're driving your car, the gameplay is the way the car steers, the way it feels to you as you drive. Does it have a lot of road noise? Is it smooth? Is it lumpy? Things like that, where the performance is more, how fast is it going when I'm flooring the pedal? Is everything inside of the motor working? How, gas mileage, shit like that. So it's more like the technicalities under the hood compared to the way you're feeling about driving that car. So that's why I'm separating it. However, you could make an argument that the two are so close together that you could combine them. But I'm going to make performance pretty short because there's not much to talk about here. This game isn't very big, and the performance is abysmal. At least on my PlayStation 4 at the time of launch, is when I played it, the frame rate was hitchy. Every time I turned around, it skipped and skipped and skipped, and it was just ridiculous. And I just do not understand what the problem is. We're not asking you to run Witcher 3 here. This game is not too big, and there's not a lot going on at any one given time, at least relatively speaking. And so while I gave it a break for the graphics, because the graphics are gorgeous and they're more art driven than they are about straight up just beautiful graphics and visuals and high resolution, I'm not going to give it a break here because you're asking it to do less with the system, and it didn't perform well at all. Just really disappointing. I hope there's a patch. I don't have much more to say. There weren't a lot of glitches, so that was great. I didn't. There was no game-breaking glitches. Everything worked where I went. Everything picked everything up. I will say, anytime you try to pick an item up and set it back where it would get stuck in the air, right up on the top. It would just float above containers and things like that. So that was a little minor thing. It was kind of immersion breaking, but certainly not game breaking. It never had a quest where you were required to return something to a container, fortunately. So really, that's all I have to say for performance. Pretty bad, at least as of launch. There may have been an update or patch since then, but the frame rate was off. It would skip every time, no matter where I went. It would skip almost constantly and very consistently throughout the entire experience. So, pretty bad. Now we arrive to gameplay. Some would say the most important part of any video game, which I can relate with and understand. For me personally, it's narrative, which is next. But that's because the experience, for me, if the narrative is awful and the game is fun, I don't always feel the need to come back to it, even if it is fun. Or maybe beat it once and never play it again. Whereas if the narrative is fantastic and the gameplay has kind of some to offer, like kind of wish it was a little better, I'll still want to finish it and be thinking about it. Oh man, like if the story's really good, I want to come back to it. And there are games like Alan Wake, gameplay was okay, but I loved that story and kind of unraveling each piece as you go through these episodes, and I was addicted to it, despite it not being the best gameplay you've ever had. So this is probably the second most important to me personally, but as a review, as a consumer of a review, you can take each of these parts separately and rank them to your own and listen to what I say, and we'll see what you think. So gameplay is next. Not a lot here. While everything works fine, I mean, you can jog and you're walking through a forest. People keep bringing up it's a walking simulator, and I can, it is. It really is. In fact, the narrative saves the gameplay. There's not a lot going on here, and it's hard. It was hard for me to say, is this a negative or a positive? Because it really is. It's about experiencing the story. The story is front and center and central to everything that this game is, and everything this game, tries to say, is all about the narrative and these characters, which we'll get into next. But everything else. I mean, you're walking around with a radio, and you find certain items, and you can radio Delilah, the other character in the game, and have this conversation. And it sounds really boring. But the narrative and the character and the acting and writing is so good, that is enough to get you through the game. But there were many times where I felt there were a lot of missed opportunities for gameplay. Times where, there would be something kind of scary, or I don't know if scary is really the right word. It's not a very good word. But there were unnerving. There would be some unnerving or disturbing moments where you could feel the hair stand up on the back of your neck, and you weren't really sure, like, oh my god, like what is out here in this forest? Is this a person? Is this like a government agency? Is this a monster? Like, you don't really know anything at one point. And there were opportunities where you had to return to your tower, and it was nighttime in the forest, and I would think, oh my god, I have to walk all the way back in this darkness And I was going, oh man, this is gonna be freaky as hell. And then it would just load, and you would just load to the next day already back in, and you missed out on this whole opportunity for this kind of tense moment to play and expand what your gameplay is doing. And they didn't do that at all. And it was some big missed opportunities in the gameplay, which were very disappointing. But it controls well. Everything is, responsive. As we talked about in the performance, there were no glitches or game-breaking bugs in the game. And it feels good. I mean, you're walking around. It looks good, as we already covered. So nothing really awful to say, but just some missed opportunities. And there was room for improvement. And I'm hoping that if they do a sequel, we'll see some of those opportunities nailed next time. The final stop on the Experience Point review train is narrative. Now, I crammed some things that are normally not in narrative into the narrative bag, mainly because I don't want to have 1,000 different categories and just, go mincemeat on this reviews here. So with narrative, obviously, story, just the overall plot, the soundness of it, the sense making, things like that, just the basic stuff, plot. Writing, script writing, performance by the characters, so acting, voice acting. And now the few other subcategories are things like music, sound. So those aren't necessarily narrative, but they're so important to a good narrative to make it. You could have put that in gameplay, but you're not interacting with sound. You're not interacting with music. It's something that's building the world, and that's why I'm putting those in narrative. And obviously, with the rest of the reviews, I'm not going to tell you all this. This is just my introduction to my new review style, if you will, or review outlines that I'm doing. Process, whatever word you want. I'm a thesaurus today. So, narrative. This is the reason to buy this game. It's $20, and it's worth $20 for this storyline. These two actors and the writing all put together, is some of the best performance in any video game I've ever played in my entire life. And that is saying a lot, especially most recently with Witcher, Mass Effect, and a few other games, Last of Us. I mean, those are some of the greatest stories, my favorite story-driven games of all time. And the quality of acting and the treatment of this script, it got me through the game. I wanted to come back and find out what was happening because they were just so real and they were so genuine that I just fell in love with these two characters. Now, as far as the plot goes, it is resounding. There's an intro that is very emotional and lets you kind of create the opening of this story in a way that was very unexpected and I really enjoyed. And as you go through as you go up this hill, it's kind of a mountain. This game is a little bit of a mountain as it starts to get a little weirder, a little crazier, a little more what as you go up. It is more and more enjoyable of a narrative. That is until you get to the climax. And it's like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like one of those climaxes where you go, oh, this is stupid, what a waste of my time. I didn't feel like it was a waste of my time. But you kind of sit there when you find out what everything is and you go, oh, okay. I don't really get that, but it makes sense, I guess. It's the narrative. The whole thing is just like, underwhelming. Very underwhelming. And that's disappointing because the game is so enjoyable just because of these characters. Laughing, I felt every possible emotion. I'm not going to go through and list them, but I would sit there and I experienced everything, and it was a truly experiencing these emotions of feeling through these characters, something as the rarest of games or movies or books or any kind of story medium. And this is why I love it, because games, a lot of times, people don't think that you can tell as good a story through games. Obviously, they don't play games, someone who thinks that, but there are people out there. And this is one of the games I would sit someone down and say, just play this. You can beat the thing in 4 or 5 hours. And despite I won't even want to call, it doesn't even have issues, despite its sort of lack of body of anything. There's not even very much here for me to complain about. It is worth the $20 price tag just to experience these characters. Henry and Delilah, just fantastic. Music, I loved the music. It is sort of the Western. I don't like country music, so don't take Western and think like country music, nothing like that. But it's got this beautiful guitar work, acoustic guitar work, as well as some electronic, not like, club electronic, all right, but just kind of this mix of these, almost like keyboard, like electronic keyboard and acoustic guitar. And it comes in at a time where you weren't really expecting it, and you're walking, you come out onto this vista with these mountains in the background and the sun rising and this music, and it just has these moments of perfection. That is why, despite everything else, you should buy this game for those few moments. They're worth it. So it's definitely worth it. The narrative is the strongest. It carries everything else on its shoulders, and I was pleased to not be disappointed. That was my expectation, that this game would have a great story and acting, and it delivered as well as it possibly could have. So, my friends, we have reached the end of this experience point review. Of course, we'll give it the final score. Those scores aren't all that important. Something we do, and a lot of different publications do. I kind of enjoy it at the end of the day. This was tough. I went back and forth between two different numbers on this, but at the end of the day, despite the fact that there really isn't much in this game, with one giant exception that we've kind of gone over, that exception being this narrative and this world that they built with these characters, is in the great stratosphere that the rest of it, while it does drag it down, only drags it down to a 7, and a 7's a great score for a game. So just fantastic. I mean, and I use fantastic all the time, and I shouldn't, because it should mean something. But really great little game, and definitely worth $20. Worth a buy from the outright price. If you want to wait, if the story is not the most important thing to you, or characters and dialogue is not the most important thing to you, totally understood. Wait for it to go down in sale. Probably be $10 here in a little while. But I hope you all enjoyed this video. I enjoyed making it. Check out my other reviews. I've done a few other games. I'm going to start making more now that I have this structure down. And you should see some more video reviews coming out in the next few months. I'm always going to be behind the curve on that. So Far Cry Primal and Division are up next. So you should see videos for that in here within weeks, maybe even a month, because I can only play so much with so much time between work and everything else, as all of you I'm sure understand. But until then, we will see you next time on The Experience Point.